Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes, if you could bear with us. Thanks for joining. Sarah, maybe you can wait a couple of minutes and then start. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's wait a few minutes. I see our attendee list is still going up pretty fast, so.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. If you are a AQMP advisory group member, would you please raise your hand and we'll promote you to a panelist.
Thanks, everyone, for your patience. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. We will make sure all the AQMP advisory members are on the panel so they can mute or unmute themselves. So again, if you are an AQMP advisory member, we're trying to go by name, but if you could please raise your hand so we can move you to the panel. Okay. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Maybe one more person move over. Okay, there are a couple of attendees over to the panel. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Zorik Pirvesian, Planning and Rules Manager with the Southwest AQMD. Thank you for participating in today's AQMP Advisory Group meeting. I'll be reading off our housekeeping remarks for our Zoom for remote meeting format, if you could bear with us. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with everyone's participation. We ask that everyone be patient during this meeting. We have two formats for participation, the Zoom web application as well as the teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. These are very important, so I ask that you pay close attention. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell or desk phone. This will ensure that we are not hearing any feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for the advisory group members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. That means that you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, we will request for comments from the AQMP advisory members first, and then ask for public comments. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make public comments on the Zoom screen, please click on the participants button on the bottom of your screen. A list of participants will appear on the right side of the screen. And then at the bottom of the list, please click on the gray raised hand button. This will signal to the host that you would like to provide public comment, and you will be added to the list. If you are using Zoom on your smartphone, a new screen will pop up with a list of participants. Look for the raised hand button on the screen. For those calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. Your name will be called when it's your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Please note that you can hang up and or leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Some additional guidelines. Please treat others with courtesy and civility and respect the public meeting process. Rules prohibiting the use of signs or posters remain in effect for video participation. Profanity, discriminatory comments, or obscene gestures is prohibited. Disorderly, unruly, or aggressive behavior that infringes upon the rights of others or disrupts the good working order of the meeting is also prohibited. Any violation of the above rules can result in your mic being mute, your video feed shut off, or you're being dropped from the phone or Zoom meeting lines. That concludes my comments. I'll hand it over to Sarah Reese to start the meeting. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's good to virtually see everyone as we kind of get more into the meat of our next AQMP process. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we're excited to do it. My name is Sarah Reese. I'm the Assistant Deputy Executive Officer at South Coast Air Quality Management District for Planning. I'd like to introduce members of my team, or maybe have them introduce themselves. So Zorik, if you can, I think you introduced yourself already, correct?
Yes.
I'm just going to go read off from the list at the top here. So Kalan.
Hi, everyone.
So we have Dr. Sangmi Lee.
Hi, good morning.
We have our counsel, Barbara Baird.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Dr. Scott Epstein. And
Hi, good morning.
I think that's it for our crew. So with that, we want to start getting you. We have a lot of material we want to cover today, and we of course want to hear your comments and inputs. But first, we want to get to approval of the minutes. I don't know if anybody had any comments on the minutes from our last meeting. Seeing none, although I think we have one. Do we have a hand up on one of our panelists? I think we have Dawn Fenton has a hand up.
Yes.
No, I did not want to make any comments. That was up from before, just to elevate
right.
to the panel or whatever. Sorry.
No problem. Legacy hand. That's fine. Okay. You're hearing none. Let's approve the minutes. And then maybe we can get started with the content of today's meeting. So do we have the presentation? Here we go. Okay, great. Click through the next slide. And let's get started with some updates. So yeah, next slide. Next slide. Okay, great. So you know, again, we're talking today about next stage of our air quality management plan. And just as a recap for our 2016 air quality management plan that was approved by our board in March of 2017. And it's a plan that addresses multiple national ambient air quality standards. So we have several ozone standards and PM 2.5 standards. And this covered both our South Coast Air Basin as well as the Coachella Valley area. So that was a plan that moved all of that forward. Next slide, please. So in terms of actions since our 2016 AQMP, we covered a lot of these in our last advisory meeting. I think the most recent stuff we have was the EPA's actions in July of 2020, and those were the approval for our 2006 24-hour PM 2.5 standard, as well as the 2016 annual standard. And there, EPA approved most plan elements. There was some conditional approval based on contingency measures that we needed to adopt. But you can see for the status of all the other actions, we have approved plans in place, but we do have some conditional approvals for contingencies. Next slide, please. So in terms of other EPA actions, in 2019, July of this past year, EPA granted our request to reclassify the Coachella Valley from a severe to extreme ozone non-attainment area. That's a provision that the Clean Air Act allows in an area that looks like you're not going to attain a particular standard. You can apply to be bumped up to the next category of non-attainment, which has the advantage of giving some additional time to be able to attain the standard. So that's what we did in the Coachella Valley. And in February of this year, EPA finalized that action for us. So that area is now classified as an extreme ozone non-attainment area with an attainment deadline in 2024. And then for the 2006 24-hour PM standard, EPA issued a proposed rule determining that we had failed to meet the attainment date of December of 2019 for that standard. And I'll talk more about what these mean as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. So in terms of contingency measures, EPA requires that we put contingency measures in place that would take effect following a determination that any of the areas has failed one of these requirements. So if we fail to meet an RFP requirement, if we fail to meet any quantitative milestone, if we fail to submit a quantitative milestone report, or if we fail to attain applicable standard. So on PM 2.5, we've established a contingency measure by, we just recently amended Rule 445, our rule regarding wood burning devices. That amendment took place in June of 2020, and that addressed contingency provisions for PM 2.5. And we did that by putting in lower curtailment thresholds by which we would curtail wood burning following any of EPA's findings of failure. We're also looking at ozone contingency measures, and we would have a further rule amendment to address those. Next slide, please. So that is what I have in terms of updates before getting to the meat. Maybe if there's anybody has any questions about what I presented, I can take those and then we can move on. Not seeing any questions, so maybe we can go on to the next presentation.
Yeah, there's one comment.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead. I think it's a phone line ending 990.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Harvey Eder. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. Just initially, question the legality of these proceedings. You're supposed to be implementing the 2016 Solar New Deal. This whole process is illegal. Like comments made to Dr. Fine to Dr. Burke within the last week or two at a meeting to the board said that you're using the COVID drop numbers to get your numbers to meet the requirements for 23. This plan's illegal. The 16 and the implementing environmental justice, the implementing total, the immediate total solar conversion plan that was first in 93 in litigation with you folks. Okay, you had an 89 federal plan. Federal plan's coming again, and it was implemented in 91. That has to all be in the record here for everybody to see. I don't think anybody's seen that from you folks. Okay. Now, when you got all these fires, those weren't put in there, you're never going to meet these standards. It's a waste of time and money. You've got limited. That has to be given over to what we're working on now and to implement the legislation that we got ran out of court on the 9th of December, and that you'll reverse on that and negotiate with us right now. We got a call within the last 2 weeks from Dr. Burke, and he indicated he wanted to go in that way. I have not talked with him since he was supposed to call me back. Okay, so we got big problems here in the land of plenty in River City, and they've got to be dealt. Sorry, I'm outside, and there's noise, and Zoom should discount this and allocate for environmental justice folks that are participating in the public process. Which is, anyway, look.
Thank you, Harvey. Appreciate your comment. It's not perhaps the most relevant to the material that we're discussing today, but appreciate your comment. We will have opportunity for general public comment at the end of the presentations as well.
So Sarah, just as a reminder, there's an opportunity for public comment on each agenda item.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, you maybe move on to the next presentation. Great. So now I'm going to give an update of where we are regarding the attainment plan for the 24-hour PM2.0 standard and South Coast Air Basin. So you can see here there's several standards regarding PM 2.5. Good news here is that we have attained the 1997 annual and 24-hour PM 2.5 standards. We attained those back in 2013, so a little bit ahead of the attainment date. Right now, we're looking at the 2006 24-hour standard that had an attainment deadline of 2019. There's also a 2012 annual standard with an attainment deadline coming up in 2025. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we figure out whether we've attained the standard, that's determined by looking at the design value. Design value is monitoring data. It's a 3-year average of the annual 98th percentile daily concentrations at each monitoring location. So the way you have calculated it, you look at the 98th percentile reading in each year, you average that over a 3-year period, and that comprises your design value. What constitutes the 98th percentile depends on how frequently your monitoring is sampled. So if you sample every day, the 8th highest reading is your 98th percentile. If you sample every 3rd day, it's the 3rd highest reading. Next slide, please. So this is what our design values look like from 2017 to 2019 in our area. And you can see that for most sites, we are below the standard of 35 micrograms per meter cubed, but we are above in Compton and we are above in Mira Loma. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in our next couple of slides. So if you look at 2018 and 2019 data, so a 2-year average where we've dropped out that 2017 data, we actually do meet the current 24-hour standard. We are close in Mira Loma, but you can see that the high level we had in Compton goes down dramatically. And that's because we had some anomalous data in 2017 that kind of really pushed us over the top for that. Next slide, please. And we look overall at our progress towards attainment. You know, you can see where our the monitors that have led our design value have shifted over time. You can also see where our concentrations have come down fairly dramatically over time. So you can see that, you know, earlier in the early 2000s, Mira Loma and San Bernardino were kind of leading. It switched over just to Mira Loma, and then it's, you know, Mira Loma and Compton for the last 5 years. But we really think that Mira Loma is the driving site for our air quality issues on PM 2.5. You know, the data that we saw in Compton really was anomalous back in 2017. Next slide, please. So in terms of our attainment status, again, we've had very significant drops in PM 2.5 concentrations since 2001. We are down 51%. But looking at the design value for that 2017 to 2019 3-year period, we did fail to attain the 24-hour PM 2.5 standard by the December 31st, 2019 deadline. And it did look like that both Muraloma and Compton exceeded that standard. Muraloma has had the highest PM 2.5 concentration for over the last 10 years. And then, again, we had this anomalous high episodes in Compton in January 1 and then late December of 2017. We really not sure what happened there. There could be all kinds of things ranging from fireworks, perhaps some local wood burning, perhaps just some crazy meteorology, but it's something that we haven't seen since and we didn't see before. So we really think it's not a normal situation. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the progress in Muraloma. That's the design site that we've been kind of governing our air quality since 2008. That's impacted by secondary formation of PM, so PM that forms in the atmosphere, as well as from direct emissions from local sources. We do see that the levels have come down significantly in Muraloma over time as well, and that we are close to attainment. Based on our preliminary 2020 design value, so calculating a design value on year to date, it shows that we will attain by the end of 2020 in Muraloma if we don't have any more than 4 days above the 35 microgram per meter cubed standard for the rest of the year. So looking into November and December, which is a time where we would expect to see some higher values, that's the critical time for us. As long as we have no more than 4 days above the standard, we will be good to go. Next slide, please. So in terms of progress in Compton, we see this kind of crazy bump up in 2017, which really stands out from the other years. Again, if we look at our preliminary design values, so calculating those measurements to date, we looked at Compton will attain the standard by the end of 2020, can have no more than 7 days above 45 microgram per meter cubed. So we feel very confident that we're okay in Compton. Next slide, please. So our implications of non-attainment. If you fail to attain the standard, first, EPA is going to issue a notice of failure to attain, and that proposed rule has already been published in the Federal Register. That was published in July of this year. You then have to look at contingency measures. So we have to start triggering contingency measures. We have those developed in Rule 445 wood burning devices. That first trigger will lower the wood burning curtailment level threshold from 30 microgram per meter cubed to 29 microgram per meter cubed. And then we also have an obligation to revise our state implementation plan. So we have a revised plan that's due to EPA December 31st of this year. Next slide, please. So in terms of what that plan means, some key requirements. So first, we have to show a 5% reduction of PM 2.5 or one of the precursors of PM 2.5 that can form it in the atmosphere. Here we have plans in place to reduce NOx emissions by more than 5% per year on our existing regulations. So we're good on that level. On our emission inventory and for attainment demonstration, we have to update our emission inventory and we have to show that we're going to attain in 2023, based on what we already have in place. So we can already make that showing on existing regulations, and it shows that we actually will likely attain even before 2023. To put a control strategy analysis together. So it's continued, for us, it's continued implementation of our serious area plan control strategy that we developed as part of the 2016 AQMP. And then we have to look at other feasible measures that we could put in place to continue to control PM 2.5. We have to go through our reasonable further progress evaluation and quantitative milestones to demonstrate that we can meet those reductions based on our baseline emissions. And then we have to look at the contingency measures that I already discussed, and we've already included those in our recent Rule 445 amendment. Next slide, please. So in terms of our attainment demonstration approach, we really have this hybrid methodology. We have our 2 high sites, but they're high for different reasons. So in Compton, again, we had these high episodes in 2017. We really think they're anomalous. We don't think it's something that's likely to repeat. It doesn't make sense. We would develop a plan around Compton based on what we know. So we're really looking at sort of a supplemental weight of evidence approach and looking at air quality trends in that area to show that this is something that was anomalous. It's not going to happen again. And we believe that Compton actually is going to be in attainment prior to EPA considering the plan based on what the current levels look like. So, again, it doesn't make sense for the levels at Compton that we experienced in 2017 to drive our approach. For Mura Loma, which is our traditional high site, that's one where we are looking at more of a regular approach where we update the emissions inventory, look at regional air quality modeling, and evaluate what we need to do there. And again, our preliminary analysis shows that we will attain with our existing regulations in place and to the extent that we adopt additional regulations that provides further assurance that we'll be able to attain at or before the 2023 attainment date. Next slide, please. Moving forward, so we're developing the required plan that's due at the end of this year, focusing again on Mura Loma with this alternate approach for Compton. We're continuing with our ongoing emission reductions from the rules and regulations we have in place. We're demonstrating the annual reduction of 5% until attainment. And again, if we're able to attain at all sites by the end of 2020, which, if I was a betting person, I would give us 50-50 odds. All this may be moot. If we attain by the end of 2020, the kind of need to have that plan in place goes away. In terms of our clean data determination, we're continuing to very closely monitor PM 2.5 levels in November and December of this year. We are looking at addressing the possible exceptional events that could occur, such as through wildfire and fireworks, continue to work with CARB and EPA on those. And there's a high likelihood of a potential clean data determination by EPA if by the end of 2020 our design values are below the standard. Next slide, please. For our public process associated with the rule, we did talk to our mobile source committee about this in August for this year. We've also been talking to our advisory group, so we're talking to you guys today about this. We also talked to our science, technology, modeling, and peer review advisory group in late August. Fall of this year, we're looking at releasing our draft plan. So target date is September 2018 to release that draft. And then also having regional public hearings associated with the plan in October of this year. And then later this year, towards the end, we'll bring the plan to our board for consideration. CARB would then bring it to their board for consideration prior to submittal to EPA. Next slide. I think that's all I have on that item. So at this point, I'll open it up for comments from our panelists and then comments from the public.
Don't see any hands.
Don't see any hands on our panelists, so going once. Maybe we'd see if any of our members of our public have questions or comments.
Yeah, we have a couple of comments. We have a phone number ending at 682.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Dr. Tom Williams, Citizens Coalition for a Safe Community. Also, we've been assisting the Harbor Gateway North people regarding their community plan development. Compton, I would highly be suspicious of the fact that you have 4 major freeways surrounding Compton, that perhaps it is not from fixed sources or directly related human sources, but from changes in the freeways. I would kind of wonder if you had high PM 2.5 based upon changes either in the weather and or the amount of truck traffic on the 4 freeways encircling Compton. So can you relate those? Because a long time ago, we did PM 10 sampling and washed down highways in Bakersfield. And we got huge amounts of small particulate from the tires of the vehicles, mostly trucks, and cadmium sources were high. So I'm quite concerned regarding Compton being blamed for fireworks and wood burning when it's encircled by some of the heaviest truck development or traffic in the city of Los Angeles and county. So can it be related to something happening on the freeways, such as closing a lane, or what happened at the ports of LA and Long Beach, trucks going in and out? Maybe it's related to that. That's all.
Thank you very much for your comment. So you raise an important point. Certainly, we have seen higher levels of PM 2.5 near roadways where there's a lot of traffic. And as you point out, sometimes it is from the wear from tires, and it can be also from brake pads, et cetera. But for the case of Compton, what we saw in 2017, it really was an anomalous year, right? And we had these kind of 2 high data points. It wasn't continuous, which was we would expect if we were to see that as a result of near roadway exposure. So we, again, kind of scratching our heads as to what happened during those 2 data points, but we don't suspect that it is as a result from the highway contribution. I don't know if any of my staff want to chime in with some additional details.
I can provide the data values measured along the Freeway 710. So the South Coast AQMD has multiple so-called near road monitoring locations that's intended to measure the pollutants from the freeway traffics at the targeting PM 2.5 and the nitrogen oxide. So 710 freeway is located relatively close to Compton, and it's impacted by heavy goods movement traffic from ports. But then, however, and then that 710 freeway measurement started in 2015 that covers when the Compton recorded abnormally high PM 2.5 levels. However, the freeway 710 site shows a lot lower concentration than Compton for the same time period. For example, the Compton shows a 39 microgram in 2015 to 2017 period. That includes that abnormally high episodes. For the same time period, 710 freeway shows only 33 microgram, indicating that Compton's value were not directly influenced by freeway traffic, rather than some local activities around the monitoring location.
We have another comment from phone number ending 990. I think it's Harvey.
I just did, damn it.
If it's related to this item, Harvey, please.
Am I on?
Yes, you
Yes,
are, Harvey.
Hello?
Yes, Harvey.
Okay, hello, I'm Harvey Yetter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. 80–90% of folks that want to see immediate total solar conversion equitably and justly in the transition. We had off our 6th Great Extinction as in 17 conference by the Vatican. The history of the planet caused by us. Big picture, and you folks are pushing methane, fossil fuels, the natural gas coming from the ports to these different roads and cities and whatnot. Okay, you got to stop it. It's self-destructive. 150 years ago, we were choosing fuels, made the same mistake with Greta's ancestor. The methane is from the Arctic has been ignored by this district. Finally got an okay from Burke to look at it and incorporating the issue from September of last year from National Geographic, the cover article, and the whole issue into the record here. That we've got nitrous oxide and methane 100 and 300 times global warming capacity in the district, used fractions of those. It's ignoring the major tipping points that are going on now, etc. So priority now, EPA is ignoring what DOE has done, and we brought up, we're whistleblowers on 3 different things, and one of them is that for standards and what's accepted for 10 years, the Sunshot program after the moonshot from the 60s has brought solar way down. It's way competitive and cost effective. You totally ignored that, not following the laws even to evaluate it. But this has got to be accepted as demonstrations. Everything that was done under DOE and with our co-helpers over in Asia and Europe. And that these are the standards that got to be implemented now. And you've got to grandfather these in. And these plans that the solar convert are the plan that we presented and that should be implemented now and is in litigation is the grand plan, and that all other local, state plans, general plans, etc., have to be subservient to that. So get used to it and implement it and do it now, because that's a law. And that's a big picture. And this is survival. We've got, new plans from the, Extinction Rebellion now. We rolled out a couple of days ago. Okay, it's on. This is, the virus this is SARS-3. SARS-1 was 03. SARS-2 was covered up by Trump and the Saudis as MERS because it went to camels for the Saudis. It had 34% death rate. And SARS-3 is this. In scientific papers, they say it's SARS-2-CV2, SARS-CV2, okay?
All right. Thank you, Arvi, for your comments. Let's go to the next commenter, Ryan Kenny, please. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ryan Kenny with Clean Energy, and thank you for that great presentation. It was very helpful. I just want to put a couple things on your radar as our company in the low NOx industry tries to get more low NOx trucks on the road. There's a couple of things at ARB I think that would be helpful for the district to get involved in. One of which, of course, is the fleet rules, which will be the subsequent regulation to the Advanced Clean Truck regulation that was passed in June. That's starting promulgation in September. And there is maybe some interest by board members to include low NOx trucks in some level, but we're not quite sure if that's going to move forward or not. And that would be helpful to have some sort of fleet mandate to get more low NOx trucks on the road. I'll also add too, the mobile source strategy is due for modification in December, and ARB staff already has released some documents that have eliminated the 900,000 low NOx truck goal that was in the 2016 mobile source strategy. So we're concerned about the dilution of that goal, if not elimination of that, going forward. And also, as you know, cap and trade auction revenues have been limited this year, and those will probably be adopted through a bill, maybe in the legislature early next year, within the first few months. And of course, this last auction on August 18th was pretty good. I think it was up about 80% of the usual average. But that would also be another opportunity to get more low NOx trucks on the road. So those 3 things are coming with ARB and their funding plan with cap and trade auction revenues. And we would just encourage South Coast AQMD to be active participants in those rulemakings to get more low NOx trucks on the road. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I just also want to add that we do have a presentation that we want to talk about control measures for the next air quality management plan. We definitely see the need for extensive penetration of near zero and zero emission technologies if you have any chance of meeting our ozone attainment deadline. So we'll talk more about that in our next agenda item after next. And then We're also proposing to establish working groups to actually discuss specific strategies that we need to attain the standards. So we'll have extensive discussions over the next year. We'll talk more about that, but thank you for your comments. We have another commenter by phone ending 050. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Philip Johnson, and my address is 1421 Melody Lane, Fullerton, California, 92831. And I have a question for Sarah Rees. Hello?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes, my question is, do you think that to help meet the 2006 24-hour PM 2.5 goal, as well as the clean date determination, in other words, to meet these standards in general, like we're talking on this in this meeting, as far as cutting the grass down on the surrounding mountains and hills around Southern California that causes the brush fires. Year after year, we have brush fires, and I know within most cities it's illegal to have brush growing on your property, but a lot of this government land and even some private is getting away with lots of brush, and it burns every year. And do you think if we had sheep or something, or goats, get rid of it, cut it down, it would help, please?
It's good point. We definitely get smoke impacts from wildfires. We're able to, when we have those impacts and they're truly due to wildfires, we were able to work with EPA and classify those as exceptional events so that they don't count towards reducing our air quality goal or meeting our air quality standards. But we are concerned about smoke impacts. We actually have work closely with CAL FIRE and other folks to in their wildfire management programs and prescribed burning programs so that we can control that, because nobody wants wildfires, right? It's not just the smoke impacts, there's a lot of property damage, impact to human health, etc. So we do work very closely with other agencies to try to minimize wildfire impacts. But in terms of interference with meeting the air quality standards, there are provisions under the Clean Air Act where we can work with EPA, and if those smoke impacts are due to wildfire, they don't count against us in terms of meeting the standard.
I understand. Thank you. I really don't think that's right, because what you're basically I'm not picking on you, but or the South Coast Air Management District. What you're saying is I am saying is the government on government land is causing fires year after year in Southern California, whether it's state, federal, local, or maybe even some private. I don't know, and then they exempt themselves because because wildfire, when it's really not wildfire. It's fires that happen on government land adjacent to cities, year after year. So now, since they're exempted, what you're telling me is that they can meet the air quality standards because of fires that they're responsible for in the first place. Is that? Do I understand this right?
Well,
Please?
Again, there are a lot of other drivers as to why we would work to try to prevent wildfire, because of there's a lot of risk to human health. There's a lot of property damage is associated with that. So there's other programs in place. And I know that, again, we do work closely with CAL FIRE to help with their prescribed burning and other programs that are designed to minimize and prevent wildfires. But as we face increasing drought conditions and other conditions, wildfire is something that's fairly inevitable in our area. But we do recognize that even if we were able to disqualify smoke impacts from in terms of our calculation as to whether we meet the standard, we do want to work to minimize smoke as much as possible, because there still are health effects associated with it.
Yes, thank you. Emma.
I think that was our last comment. If you could go to the next item.
Yes, let's go to the next item. So now we're going to talk about the ozone extreme area plan in the Coachella Valley. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So our attainment status for the Coachella Valley, we are at extreme non-attainment area for the 1997 8-hour ozone standard with an attainment date of 2024. Again, there's multiple ozone standards in place. We did attain the 1979 1-hour standard back in 2013. And that had, so that's in attainment. We have upcoming standards for the 2008 standard and then the 2015 standard with deadlines in 2027 and 2033. Next slide, please. We have, again, a good news story in Coachella Valley in that the ozone has been trending down fairly significantly since the early 90s, which is good because it was pretty high. You can see where we have two dashed lines here reflecting the 1979 1-hour standard, which we met back in mid 2000s, and then we have the 8-hour ozone standard. So those lines have been trending down, but we're still a little above the 1997 8-hour standard. You can see back in 2016, we were very close and we had been trending down. And so if that trend had continued, we would have attained by 2019, but we did trend up a bit in 2017 and 2018. Next slide, please. This area, the Coachella Valley, was classified as a severe non-attainment area originally with an attainment date of June 15th, 2019. Again, as you can see from the previous slide, on monitoring data, it showed that the area did not attain the standard by that deadline. Under the Clean Air Act, if we get to a point where we aren't going to attain a standard, we can request a voluntary reclassification to the next highest level of the standard. And so we did that. We submitted a request to EPA to bump up the Coachella Valley from a severe classification to an extreme classification. EPA granted that request, and so the new attainment date for the Coachella Valley is June of 2024. This also triggers a requirement to revise the state implementation plan, and that is due to EPA February of 2021. Next slide, please. So in terms of the air quality, exceedances in the Coachella Valley are really driven by transport of ozone and its precursors from the South Coast Air Basin. So a lot of emissions, as we know, in South Coast that gets transported over. So it's both the direct ozone as well as precursors that go over and then form ozone in the Coachella Valley. Next slide, please. Again, this trend line shows that we have been reducing both the overall concentrations as well as the number of exceedance days. So this is a good sign here, but we still show that in 2019, it looked like the fourth highest was down below the standard. But so it's a good story, and it's showing that the trend lines are continuing to go down, and that we feel confident that we'll be able to attain the standard by the deadline. Next slide, please. So in terms of our base and future design values, the station, looking at both Palm Springs and Indio, which are the two monitoring stations we have in the Coachella Valley, our 2018 base year design values, 89 and 84 parts per billion, so slightly above. But in 2023, our future design value was showing that we are able to meet the standard. So in Palm Springs and Indio, below. And in fact, based on our preliminary modeling, we believe we'll be able to meet that standard in 2022 as well. So we'll be able to meet in advance of the required attainment date. Next slide, please. So we do, in terms of what we're going to do to meet attainment, our existing rules and regulations on the books are going to provide the emission reductions that we need in the future years to be able to attain the standard. There are some recently adopted rules and regulations since our 2016 AQMP that continue to be implemented and provide additional assurance that we'll be able to meet the 2023 deadline. And then based on our preliminary modeling, we think we'll be able to get to attainment sooner, which is good news because we always want to be able to attain as soon as possible. And that helps buffer against any uncertainties that we have in our meteorology, in our emissions inventory, in perhaps our modeling approach as well. Next slide, please. We do have to submit a revised plan, so we have key requirements and elements of that plan include a revised emission inventory. We have to show how we're going to demonstrate meeting the standard by the deadline. And again, we think we can do that through our existing regulations that are on the books that are going to continue to provide those emission reductions. We have to provide a control strategy analysis. For us, it's continued implementation of the 2016 AQMP. We have to go through an analysis of reasonable available control technology and reasonably available control measures to show that those are on the books. We look for a reasonable further progress demonstration. We can achieve that based on the reductions that are already in our existing regulations. We do have a change on the threshold by which we classify stationary sources to major sources. So we had to change that. Now it used to be that if a source emitted more than 25 tons per year of NOx and VOC, that was a major source, and now that's been reduced to 10 tons per year. And so we're making changes to our Title V and new source review programs accordingly to reflect that change. And then we also have to have contingency measures in place. And so we're looking at a rule revision to reflect that. For our, if we can go back one slide on our public process. So we've been talking about this plan. There was an AB 617 meeting in August 26 for the Coachella Valley community. We discussed the plan at that meeting. We're also talking today to you guys about this. We plan to release our draft plan in September 11th. So that's coming up pretty soon. We will be going to our mobile source committee in September. We have a public consultation meeting also planned later in September. Public comments on the plan would be due mid-October. And then we'd be releasing our draft plan November 3rd, going back to committee again in the end of November. So it's a bit of a compressed timeline, but we will be then going to our board for consideration in our December board meeting, and then submitting it to CARB for their for approval, and then it would go on to EPA. Next slide. And I think that covers the content for that item. So at this point, we'll take comment from our panelists as well as then comment from members of the public.
We have a comment from Rita Loof. Go ahead, Rita.
Hi, Zorik. Hi, everybody. Just a quick clarification question. So this would be specific to the Coachella Valley area, this particular plan element. And then on slide 30, you mentioned the reasonably available control technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about what process you'll be undertaking related to that and what that analysis will look like?
Sure. Maybe Zorik, if you can go through that.
Yeah, maybe I can ask Kalam to also assist. So we are looking at existing measures that were in the AQMP. In a sense, we're looking at reductions that are needed for attainment demonstration, right? As Sarah mentioned, in terms of reduction needed attainment, we are relying on baseline emissions, meaning existing regulations that are in place that are showing that we will demonstrate attainment by 2023, if not earlier. But as a part of that, we're also looking at measures that are and also identifying recently adopted regulations. To add anything else to that?
Sure, Rita. So I could add something about our RACM control analysis. So what we're doing is we're building it upon the last AQMP. We're going to update it with all the recent updates from other agencies, looking at the recently adopted rules and regulations in other agencies, and to see if there is anything that we can borrow and adopt. So, but keep in mind that for RACM, it will be considered as RACM control measures if they could advance attainment year altogether. So we are in the process of identifying any RACM control measures, but just based on the preliminary analysis, we've already implemented all the RACM measures currently, and we could not identify any additional control measures that could advance attainment year by 1 year.
Thank you.
Hey, sir, this is David Rothbarn. Quick question as far as perspective here. Is this something where transport from the rest of the South Coast Basin is impacting this area? And if so, is there a possibility that we'll have to have further controls in the rest of the basin to control what's going on in the Palm Springs area?
So right now our modeling shows that the existing regulations that we have on the books from our 2016 AQMP in South Coast are sufficient to be able to attain in the Coachella Valley. There have been other regulations that we've adopted subsequent to the 2016 AQMP that will give us additional assurances that we'll get there. So we're not anticipating that we would have to do more in South Coast Basin for Coachella. Now, whether we have to do more in South Coast Basin to South Coast is another question, but for Coachella, we're okay with existing regulations.
Thank you for that response. And then one more quick question. As far as the refinement of modeling, will there be an assessment of sort of the COVID response and with a lesser amount of traffic, trying to refine our models? I don't know if anything's been done like that, as far as trying to say what further actions we need to utilize to get to attainment. I'm just curious if there's new information as far as the direction you may go to get to attainment.
Yeah, I don't think we have any new information regarding any COVID impacts or what that looks like. That is something that we are looking at, though. Like, if nothing else, it's a great kind of experiment, right? To see what happens if you are reducing emissions fairly significantly and what those impacts would be on ozone and other air quality parameters. But I don't think we have anything new to add right now in terms of what that looks like for our SIP planning. Zorik or Sangmi, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we're still relying on the 2016 RTP projections. So as you mentioned, there could be some very short-term effect from COVID, but in a sense, we're assuming that, you know, the projections that were in the last RTP will still continue. We have a comment from Aaron Rojas. Go ahead.
Hello. Please. Hello. My name is Aaron. I'm with the 29 Palms Band Mission Indians in Coachella. And I had a question about the two ground monitors in Palm Springs and Indio. Are those the only two monitors being used to determine ozone attainment for the Coachella Valley? And I'm curious because, you know, the Coachella Valley extends all the way to, you know, Mecca and Thermal. So I'm wondering if those two monitors, if they are the only ones being used to see if it is attainment, if it's representative of the whole entire Coachella Valley. Thank you.
Yes, we have two monitoring stations, but Scott, if you could elaborate.
Yeah, so those are the two monitoring stations that we use for ozone. However, Palm Springs is much higher than Indio. So we're pretty certain that the peak ozone values occur in the northern Coachella Valley or the western Coachella Valley. And then as you get further south or east, concentrations get lower from ozone, just mainly because a lot of that ozone comes from the South Coast and also from the precursors that get transported from the South Coast. So we're fairly certain that if we do attain in Palm Springs, we're certainly going to attain at points further south and east of there.
And I will say where we place the monitors, that's subject to an analysis that we have to do that's required by EPA. We basically have to put monitors in areas where we expect to see the worst air quality, or monitors in a place where it would better characterize what air quality looks like for a region. So, you know, those monitors are there by design. And also for ozone, ozone is a regional pollutant. So, you know, we would get, you know, you can have a monitor in one location that can be representative of a broader area in terms of overall air quality. But to Scott's point, we do believe that the higher levels that we're seeing in Palm Springs, that's sort of where the worst of it is, and that it's as you move further away from Palm Springs down through the Coachella Valley, that those levels go down fairly dramatically.
Do we have any other comments from the AQMP advisory members before we go to public comments? I don't see any raised hands, so we'll go to the public comments. Phone number 80 ending 682. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Tom Williams. You mentioned what I call the M word, modeling. Who can I contact to find out about the Coachella modeling of ozone? That's all.
You can contact either one of us. You can contact me and I can put you in contact with Dr. Sangmi.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Phone number ending 050. Please go ahead.
Hello again. My name is Philip John Johnson from Fullerton, California. And my question is, do you think the Air Quality Management District would have a better attainment measures and goals if fires that started on government land that is designated as wild, but are started by arsonists? For example, I think 3 years ago, there was two major fires in Southern California, brush fires that were started by arson, and I believe on government land. So I think I'd like to know if it would be more honest to really not characterize them as wild fires because a man started them or a woman started them in 2 cases. Please.
That's I hear your concern. It's a little outside of our wheelhouse in terms of how we can characterize those. I will say for ozone, you can occasionally get some impacts of ozone as a result of wildfires because of the heat, because of the emissions that are generated by those fires. We aren't seeing those impacts in Coachella Valley. But again, kind of how one would classify and characterize wildfires is not really subject to our agency.
Thank you. I think, Harvey, you have your hands raised. If you have a specific comment on this item, on the Coachella Valley plan, please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Harvey.
This is howdy. This is Harvey Eder speaking for myself and for the public Solar Power Coalition and for the 80–90% of folks, voters, citizens, etc., that want to see equitable, just, immediate solar transition to deal with our climate and other problems. This Dr. Tom hit it on the head. Planning models. Okay, this is like using your models to rope in Coachella and get them to give you more time to extend the 23 deadline to 24, 25, whatever. It's garbage. It won't work. We're opposing and going to be opposing coming up, later this month the downgrading. Okay, cannot do. It's myopic. Getting the big picture. The big picture is the whole enchilada is going to change. And I introduced this term to Fabian a couple of days ago. Institutional inertia. Y'all's captured agencies, and there is law on this. Institutional racism relates to institutional inertia. This is that constants that we discussed it. It's from physics. The ability to move and change things, you've got to overcome a certain power, force, slip downs, etc. We're all got conflicts of interest here. I've heard in discussing, and I was surprised, self-interest at very high-level board meetings. We're talking about the future of democracy. We're talking about the future of life on this planet, and we've got to be as objective and action-oriented as possible. And this is myopic, it's pablum, it's hiding the ball, it's obfuscation, and it's bad karma to boot. So we can do better than this, folks. We got to do better. Let's put on our thinking caps and whatnot, and roll up our sleeves and put our nose to the grindstone. Some of us need it. Look, enough. Let's do it. Not push it off to the next or the seventh generation.
Thank you, Harvey. Any other comments on this item? If none, we'll go to the next item. You can have the presentation. Okay, so on this item, we're going to discuss the development of control measures for the next air quality management plan. As Sarah said, this is our next comprehensive plan that we'll be developing. As a way of background, EPA adopted the 70 parts per billion National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ozone in 2015. As you can see from the slide, South Coast Air Basin is classified as an extreme non-attainment area with an attainment date of August 2038. And Coachella Valley is classified as a severe non-attainment area with an attainment date of August of 2033. The status of classification for other ozone standards are also listed on this slide. Next slide, please. For this new 2015 8-hour ozone standard, there are a number of SIP obligations that we require to develop and submit to EPA by the required deadlines. In the last AQMP advisory group meeting, if you recall, we discussed the 4 items: baseline inventory, emission statement certification, RAC demonstration, and the VMT offset demonstration. These items have been prepared, adopted, and submitted to EPA before the August 3rd deadline. Next August, there are a couple of requirements. Could go back. Next year, we have a couple of items that are due to EPA regarding certification of our NSR program and also certification about clean fuels for boilers, which are relatively minor items. But the 2020 AQMP will be our next comprehensive air quality management plan to address the attainment of the 2015 8-hour ozone standard. So we will have detailed emissions inventory, forecast, control strategy, attainment demonstration, and all the other items that are listed on this slide. Next slide, please. So we are just about to start actually discussions and development of control measures for the next air quality management plan. I'll talk about the approach that we have in mind to discuss with the group. But in terms of the overall control strategy, I think there's no secret that we're going to need significant levels of NOx reductions to demonstrate attainment of this standard. In the last plan, we did say that we needed 45 and 55% NOx reductions by 2023, 2031. And very likely, we need even more reductions to meet the attainment of this standard by 2037. 2037 meaning that the entire reductions have to be achieved in the year prior to the attainment deadline of August of 2038. So no surprises, we need extensive penetration and transition to near zero and zero emission technologies in both mobile source and stationary sources where it's feasible. We also need extensive transition to cleanest available technologies. We're talking about tier 3 ocean going vessels, tier 4 locomotives, cleanest aircraft engines, tier 4 off-road equipment. So we need significant reductions, as we all know, to get to our attainment. We definitely need a good combination of aggressive control measures, regulatory measures, and in combination with incentive programs. We also hope to eliminate the reliance or any need on this 182E5 black box reductions that we have in the past. So we would like to completely eliminate that, given the significant technology advances that have been made over the last several years. Hope to eliminate the reliance on these measures. We also need to look at seeking additional legislative authority where it's applicable. Perhaps one category might be our fleet rules, that we could seek additional legislative authority to tighten them up and make them based on cleanest available technologies. We also need to seek new sources of funding. Obviously, regulations alone may not be adequate to give us the reductions that we need. We need complementary incentive programs. We also would like to work closely with our state and local government partners to maximize reductions from residential and commercial buildings. This category has been identified a number of times before. And when we talk about residential and commercial buildings, we're talking about space heating, water heating, cooking, stoves, wood burning, even IC engines. So collectively, they are significant and they account about 20 tons of NOx emissions based on our previous estimates. We'll be updating those numbers for the next plan, but this category as a whole is significant. So we need to look at more creative ideas, how to reduce these emissions and work with other government partners. Next slide, please. So traditionally, the AQMP measures have included what we have proposed, South Coast AQMD measures for primarily for stationary sources, which we'll be doing again. We'll be evaluating our existing control measures in the last AQMP. I would also be looking to identify any new control measures for the next air quality management plan for stationary sources. In the last plan, we also, as you recall, we had included a number of mobile source measures. These included our facility-based control measures, measures that would rely on additional legislative authority over our fleet rules, and also additional incentive programs. But of course, the bulk of the reductions will have to come from CARB's updated state strategy for the South Coast Air Basin from mobile sources. That is something that CARB will be developing in conjunction with all stakeholders, and also VOC reductions from consumer products that will be part of their state strategy. Finally, we'll also be looking at SCAG's 2020 RTP and SCS, and any reductions that may come from these strategies and transportation control measures that we would identify. Next slide, please. So in terms of control measure development, we are proposing to have working groups in 3 key areas, namely on-road mobile sources, off-road mobile sources, and residential and commercial buildings. Again, this doesn't mean that we're not going to focus on major stationary sources. All those discussions will still take place with the larger AQMP advisory group, but we felt that at least with these 3 areas, we could have more focused discussions with everybody. And we expect these to be bi-monthly meetings or even more frequent as needed, starting from hopefully November of this year, going through October of next year, when we expect to release our draft plan. And it will be open to everyone. But we would like to sort of present where we are with respect to these source categories. What is the status of existing regulations? What's the status and benefits that we expect to get from recently adopted regulations? And essentially what we need to get, what additional reductions and opportunities would be available from these source categories. So everyone is welcome to participate. We will announce these working groups, and we will invite all of you to attend these group discussions. But as I said, again, we are in the process of evaluating our existing measures, developing new control measures for stationary sources, and we will bring those updates to the AQMP advisory for discussion. But if there are any suggestions from the group for additional working groups, obviously we'd like to entertain that too. We're open to additional working groups that the advisory group as a whole would think it's worthwhile to have. But again, like I said, we are not excluding any category from these control measure discussions. Next slide. Just on my final slide, in terms of our schedule, the AQMP advisory meetings have already initiated, as you noted. We are in the process of updating our emissions inventory and forecast and modeling platforms. The control strategy development will continue this year through next year. I mean, this is kind of a short time frame, but over the next year, we expect to have a lot of discussions with all stakeholders on identifying and defining new control strategies. We're looking at for all creative and innovative ideas. I think a couple of commenters already noted that we need to be able to define strategies and again, not rely on black box reductions. So we'll be looking forward to work with everybody. Again, if we didn't have this idea of working groups last time, but now that we do, we just need to decide if we still need to have a control strategy symposium. Again, the working groups will cover these main categories, and there will be reports and updates from the working groups to the main groups. So the main advisory group will be kept up to date on the development of the working groups. But we expect to release our draft plan next fall, October, November of next year, and then hold our regional hearings by winter of next year and present the final plan to AQMD and cardboard by summer of next year before submitting to EPA before the August deadline. So that concludes my presentation. We'd be happy to entertain any questions. First with the panelists. One comment from Peter Okorowski.
Thank you, Zork. Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to ask some clarifications on slides 33 and 34.
33, you can, okay. Go ahead.
So in the past, many of the AQMPs have touched on more than just one of the NAAQS standards. And I just wondered if I could assume that the work you're going to do for the 2022 AQMP will also cover necessary actions that might be needed for the 97 and the 08 standards as well, or is it just going to focus on the 2015 standard? Thanks.
Yeah, Sarah can comment too. I think we're looking at hopefully updating the attainment demonstration for the other standards to the extent that's feasible and possible.
So what I'm thinking of is there's a 2024 or 2023 attainment requirement, and there has to be sort of the replacement of the or identification of the strategies to replace the black box measures. I think it's 2 years. Sarah, you're better at this than I am, but I think it's 2 years before the attainment date, something has to be identified. Will that happen in the 2022 AQMP process, or is that going to be a separate process?
I don't know if Sarah was going to respond to that, but again, Peter, if you recall, we did submit the contingency measure plan last year that was intended to address the black box reductions.
Okay, so that's what that was as well. That was for this. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I do remember that, Zork. I just wasn't 100% sure that was ticking this box. So thank you.
Yeah, and sorry for the delay in responding, but yeah, I mean, I think to the extent this particular AQMP, I think is going to be a lot more focused. I think in 2016 we were, did incorporate a lot of other standards and a lot of other considerations, but we are, kind of focusing in on this particular one.
Thank you, Dr. Reese.
Okay, our next commenter is Bill Lamar. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Zork. On your slide 35, I guess it is, you're talking about the needing an extensive transition to near zero and zero emission technologies in mobile and stationary sources where feasible. Some years ago, I guess a few years back, you all decided that you were going to take a NOx heavy approach. So I'm assuming that you're talking about NOx here. When you say an extensive transition, how much further do we have to go in terms of volume or tons to come into attainment? And then the second part of that question is, how reliant are you also on slide 35 for new sources of funding? Are you still reliant or looking at $1 billion a year for 14 years? and if the failure to get that means that we don't reach attainment. So I'm trying to get some sort of quantification here on all of this.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't obviously done the updated quantification for the plan. We are in the process of updating our inventory and forecast, and we'll be presenting all those results to the AQMP advisory group within the next few months. But if last AQMP is any, if you can use that as our basis, we did identify need for near zero and zero emission, even in the last AQMP, and the extent of reductions that we said we need for 2031 from all sources was at least 55% reduction above and beyond all the existing regulations, which is significant when you consider that there's a number of regulations that are being implemented now, and those were already in the baseline in the 2016 plan. So in terms of the quantity, we will refine it, but it's likely to be even higher than 55% from baseline, but we will refine those numbers and come back to the group.
In terms of your comment on sort of the extensive transition and how extensive it needs to be, yeah, we are pursuing NOx controls as sort of the driver for ozone. That's what our modeling and what our data supports as the most effective pathway to get to attainment. As you're aware, the vast majority of NOx emissions in the basin are due to mobile sources, and from that, heavy duty engines. And so we still need to push very significantly in turning over those fleets, getting to cleaner fleets on the trucks, on the ships, on locomotives, and also on construction equipment. So there's still a lot of work we need to do when we understand the lift there.
In terms of the sources of funding, new sources, I think that's probably definitely going to be part of the control strategy of the plan in all likelihood. But as I said, we still need to look at what we can get from regulations going forward, right? I mean, and then look at the balance of it that we need to get from incentive programs. So we will also be refining the amount of funding that would be needed per year going forward. But in all likelihood, we would need that complementary incentive funding.
All right, so the $1 billion a year is not a hard number, but you do need some measure of increased funding in order to turn over engines or whatever it is to reduce the amount of NOx that we presently have to battle to get, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and then my last question, if you will, on slide 34, you have under August 3rd, 2028, Section 85 fees if we fail to attain. Is August 3rd, 2028 the deadline for Section 185 fees to kick in, or is it a year or 18 months before that?
Yeah, I think it's 2 years, 10 years before the attainment date. We have to have a program in place. So we have to adopt the program and have it in our books, but it won't be effective until and unless, we are non-attainment.
You said 10 years?
10 years prior to the attainment date of 2038, which is 2028, we have to have this program in place. So we have to adopt the program by 2028 and have it in our books.
Okay, so then we're looking forward if and when Section 185 fees might kick in.
Yeah, then again, that would only kick in if we are in non-attainment.
At 2028.
2038.
Oh, 2038.
Right.
I see.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next commenter, Francis Keeler. Go ahead.
Hi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard recently some information at one of the board committee meetings that while we have seen throughout the pandemic some fairly significant reductions in NOx, we've not seen that concurrent reduction in ozone. So the question is, how do we know? And when I first started with the district, we kept saying we needed VOC, VOC, VOC reductions, and now NOx. So do we still think our models hold up? And are we seeing any more trends in NOx, the NOx relationship to reductions in ozone, reductions in NOx to reductions in ozone? Are we going to have some more information to the AQMP advisory group, and what are we seeing now?
Thanks, Francis. That's a great question. I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Sang-Mi for more details. But you know, we're still trying to evaluate what all went down in terms of the impacts felt from COVID, both in terms of what was the actual change in emissions. There were a number of confounding other factors that have happened during this time. You know, when the pandemic first was in, everybody locked down, that corresponded to a period of really rainy weather where it was super clear and everybody's like, oh, it's magic, the emissions went down because everybody's home and everything's fine. You know, we're finding out more about, that was really attributed more to weather. So we're still investigating what that happens, but in short, we still believe that this is a NOx driven problem for us that hasn't really changed our evaluation of the modeling, but perhaps Sang-Mi, if you want to add some more detail to that.
Sure. So yeah, thanks for the question. So yes, we have presented to the board that there has been kind of a sizable NOx emission reduction due to early stage of the shelter-in-place order, which is mostly driven by reduced traffic. But at the same time, there were changes in weather condition. It's like in the mid to late March timeframe, there was frequent precipitation, and then the weather was really in a way to clean the air quality. However, they switched quickly that to the way that it came with early spring high temperature days and then really conducive to the bad ozone. So weather played a substantial role in the high ozone episode observed in the springtime. At the same time, there is intricacy of ozone chemistry played a significant role in that phenomena as well. So we have seen we expected reduction in NOx emission. However, the ozone chemistry in the South Coast Air Basin is in a way that reduced the NOx, a little bit of reduced the NOx, I have to say, works in a way that against the ozone concentration. We call it temporarily increase of ozone on the way to attain the ozone standard. But what is happening is when there is abundance NOx, NOx promotes ozone. However, at the same time, it suppresses ozone production. That's why we call it the intricacy of ozone chemistry. However, still, if you have enough reduction of NOx, that's what we propose to attain the standard in the future years, then it reduces the ozone pollution. However, so we have an in-house analysis to explain how much of chemistry, how much of emission, and how much of weather actually contributed to that high ozone phenomena in springtime. But that still, we think our modeling and then chemistry and transport incorporated in the modeling system are in the right way and the right track to be used in this attainment demonstration and AQMP strategy. And then this, the COVID situation kind of provide unique opportunity to kind of validate the modeling tool as well. So we approach in that way as well, but then still, the conclusion we have in-house is we are on the right track, and then it is correctly represented in our modeling system.
So, and then one thing I can just add from the measurement perspective. So we have a okay sense of what's going on with NOx because we measure NOx, all across the basin, right? So we have a sense of what's happening with NOx concentrations. The emission side is a little more uncertain, and we're working towards figuring that out. But the VOC changes are much more uncertain right now. And that's because it's a lot harder to measure VOCs. So we started doing some additional VOC measurements back in May. and we got them deployed as fast as possible. And we're still looking at that data to see what's happened with VOCs, but you can imagine some sort of strange effects on VOC concentrations. Like, for example, everybody's disinfecting a lot more and using a lot more hand sanitizer. And we really don't know how much that could actually affect the VOC inventory, but you could expect some strange things to have happened with VOC concentrations. And as Sangmi mentioned, the chemistry, the NOx VOC ratio, the chemistry is really important for governing ozone. So we haven't seen anything that is inconsistent with what the models have suggested. We need to kind of build a few more pieces of the puzzle before we can kind of make some broader conclusions.
Okay. Todd Campbell, you had your hand raised. You were in the public comment section, then, but I promoted you to panel. Do you still have a comment, Todd?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
I love being promoted, by the way,
Hello?
Zorit. How are you? Thank you. I guess my comments are, if we think we're going to be able to raise enough money to meet attainment, I got a really great bridge in Alaska to sell to you. I think it's been proven over the last couple of years that our ability to get something through the legislature, unfortunately, has not been tremendously successful. And I also think that, the Air Resources Board is pretty focused on zero emissions exclusively, which means you're not going to get a lot of cost-effective reductions anytime soon, at least in terms of programs. Certainly programs seem to be headed towards, or at least favoring, in my view, overly favoring zero emission strategies as opposed to both near zero and zero emission strategies. So I guess my question is how soon are we going to get back on track with regards to the facility-based and indirect source rule measures? The one thing I think that is going to be mission critical, and quite frankly, at this point, I don't care if they're zero emission or near zero emission vehicles. We need to get trucks that are being purchased right now to be near zero or zero emission vehicles. And if we don't get the funds, we're going to need to have the background or backbone policy that guides folks in the business space to do the right thing. And I think that we've been kicking the can way too long, and a lot of businesses out there think, you know what, we're just going to count on incentives and not worry about this, and let's just roll the dice with non-attainment. But I think that's really, that kind of strategy is going to come back to bite us. And, a lot will depend upon, I think, the election, and I'm not even sure what that really means, either way. But shame on us if we don't try to meet attainment. And we need to figure out how to convince the board, as well as the stakeholders around the table, that something has to be done. Otherwise, there could be real consequences in 2023. And the Air Resources Board can ignore it all they want. But the reality is that we have real federal deadlines and we need to meet attainment.
Thanks, Todd, for that. We're right there with you. We are continuing to work on our facility-based measures and continue that work. It's not going to be enough by itself. As you're aware, we have limited authority over mobile sources, even using our indirect source rule authority. But we are, this has got to be an all of the above approach, right? And we look at incentives, we look at what we can do from a regulatory perspective, we look at what we can do to leverage CARB regulations, and then we look to see what we can do in terms of voluntary commitments as well. We kind of throw everything at it.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate that, Sarah. But I also think that we need to do a better job at educating how urgent this is to some of the board members and everything else, because I'm very concerned. We should not be delaying facility-based and indirect source rules based on COVID. We should be moving forward as fast as possible. We're running out of time. It's 2020 and we need to get there by 2023. I don't know if I give us a 50-50. Although I like the optimism. I always try to be as optimistic as possible. But thank you. And thank you, Zor.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the AQMP advisory members before we go to public comments? Seeing none.
Yes, Dawn Fenton.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Don.
Sir, I just wanted to note for the group, there's a question about a NOx strategy that there was a study that was submitted for the public record with the recent CARB NOx regulation board hearing on consideration of the NOx regulation, a study that was done by Ramble Engineering about this issue and addressing the concern that even though NOx emissions had gone down significantly, that the ozone had not or had actually increased. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I can certainly forward that on to whomever to be looked at, but I think that's something I'd like to make sure that our folks are that the South Coast folks are looking at and assess why they either agree or disagree with that analysis.
Thank you. Sangmi, go ahead.
So yeah, thanks for the comments. And then yeah, we are well aware of the study by the Ramber. And then in fact, ever since we started working on 2016 AQMP, like 4 or 5 years ago, we have extensive discussion with the scientific community, regulatory community, industry communities on these NOx issues. So we even hosted a so-called Southern California Ozone Symposium 2 years ago in Riverside. You see Riverside campus. We only invited this leading scientist in the area. We're all put together and then we all brainstormed and then how to figure out what has to be done more. So the conclusion so far is the strategy at the South Coast AQMD employed and the modeling tools we use in AQMP are up to date and then reflect the state of science so far. Having said that, there are areas to improve, including the uncertainties and accuracies of some numerical schemes or even emissions inventory. There are many follow-up researches ongoing, and South Coast AQMD also sponsoring multiple studies, researches to improve understanding. But then still, and then also as mentioned, this COVID situation provides sort of natural the experiment that in real world there was reduced NOx emission and then what will happen. But still, what we believe up to best our knowledge is there is a temporary disbenefit in ozone on the way, on the path to attain the standard. That is when there is a little bit of NOx reduction that works against us, meaning that there is a temporary increase in ozone concentration. However, if there is a sufficient reduction in NOx, we expect that will eventually lead to a low enough concentration that will meet the standard. So that is so far the summary of what we have, but then I'd like to reiterate that there is really active the study and research going on there.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, just one other point. This study that was submitted for the record is since the COVID pandemic, so it's a very recent study as well. So, okay, I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that is showing different results, or different suppositions. So, okay.
Thank you. Again, in the STMPR advisory group will be kind of the forum as we go forward for the next plan. There'll be opportunities to have more technical discussions on modeling for the next plan. Okay, we'll go to our public comments. A phone number ending 682. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Dr. Tom Williams from Citizens Coalition again. One of the slides indicated coordination with the state and local governments. A real problem that we recently reviewed and made comments on was the goods movement plan for the MTA Metro organization. there's a real problem here because they are saying they need equity in their rules, and thereby they will reduce the importance of railroad versus trucks, because trucks and the drivers and the Teamsters Union are both political and also equity issues. So we're quite concerned regarding near zero or zero emissions and its equity implications. If you don't have the money to convert them, who's going to pay? And there's an equity issue. On the other side, we have two Pacific Coast ports that are totally railroad, one in Prince Rupert Sound and one in Mexico. And they're growing very, very well. And they have no trucks. So there's a question as to Metro's goods movement depends upon having trucks coming out of the ports of LA and Long Beach in order to achieve equity. Whereas it used to be there was a plan to put more on rail and get it to the high desert corridor. So that's one issue, Metro. The other issue that was brought up in one of your slides was SCAGs. How does SCAGs work with you guys? That's a real issue for me because in the Harbor Gateway North Community Plan area, we had a SCAGs projection that we had to follow. The population was going to increase by 2,000, but the jobs were going to increase by 4,000, and thereby there was going to be 2,000 new commuters. And I say, how is there any way that AQMD can influence SCAGs as far as their projections for the next 25 years, being more consistent with trying to reduce commuters? And I say in background, Metro has had their next gen plan in review, and that reduces the number of bus lines. So we're quite confused as to, is SCAGs totally independent of everything? Or can we influence SCAGs to bring the projections into some sort of consistency with environmental quality in the future? 25 years. So that's all.
Thank you, Tom. On the question related to SCAG, is there a representative from SCAG that would like to make a response? But in terms of, as far as what we have to do, obviously we're required to use the projections from the MPO, and SCAG does have their latest projections in their 2020 RTP SCS, which we are required to use in the next plan. And I guess those growth projections were developed based on input from all the stakeholders, regional and local and other agencies, based on my understanding. So if anybody from SCAG would like to make a further comment on that, please raise your hand so I can identify you. I don't see anyone. Oh, Rongshang. Okay. Yeah, Rongshang is here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, sorry, because I was also watching our joint committee meeting, so that's why I only catch your hold on, let me show on my video.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry, that's from a different, just a minute.
There's a party going on in the background there.
Yeah, hold on, just okay, good. All right, yeah, my apologies because I was also watching another meeting. SCAG's Joint Policy Committee is very important for the adoption of our connection card in its entirety. So I didn't hear the comments, but I did hear what your response. So if the comment can repeat his comments again, I can try to clarify based on your response too.
I think comment was about how SCAG comes up with their projections and how can that be influenced, essentially, if I summarize the comment correctly.
Okay, yeah, if that is the case, then your response is certainly very appropriate. As you know, we develop our long-range regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategies, short for RTP-SES, every 4 years. So that starts actually with the growth forecast. It's both we call it bottom-up and a top-down approach. In terms of the bottom up, we reach out to I think 196 local jurisdictions in the SCAG region, and to gather their input about their jurisdictions growth forecast in terms of population and jobs and that's a very lengthy collaborative process. And also at SCAG, we're also doing the regional growth forecast that are tied to national trend, California state, the relationship. So in the end, we kind of combine both. So it's, I think, at least 2 to 3 years of very extensive process that receive a lot of input from local jurisdictions and academia, etc. So, so that's how the growth forecast is projected. So does that answer the question?
I think so.
Thank you.
And in terms of comment about, again, near zero and zero emission, as we said, we need extensive penetration of these technologies, and I think everyone's contribution is going to be critical at all levels of government.
Right, and yeah, sorry if I may, actually in our Connect SoCal, the 2020 RTP-SS, we do have actually a strategy. We try to go above beyond what state mandates in terms of both the EV penetration, also the charging infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to our commenters. Lawrence, Caribbean. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yes, thank you. I do have comments, and I'm going to say the one that I think is the most important first. We have this time where we're staying home, commuting via the computer, etc. And I think a reasonable person believes that that has made a difference, significant, on air quality. And I think a reasonable person believes that there is an opportunity that goes with that should be supported and encouraged by the South Coast Air Quality Management District in possibly looking at setting goals for people to reduce their commutes by working at home some number of days during the week, looking at just kind of saying again that when you carpool, it's a good idea. All those things that have been in the dialogue for a long time, with an opportunity to package them and deliver them in an atmosphere of public support. And to really, you say you're thinking about it or talking about it, I think you really ought to start looking at what can you say to people in that general regard that would encourage their supervisor to allow them to telecommute after, or commute from home after all this is over. Really, I don't think most people are going to say, oh, it was just because it was raining that the air quality was better. I think most people would say, hey, I got on the freeway and there was nobody there. And I think that would logically reduce pollution and enhance air quality. So I encourage you to take an opportunity to get some gain in air quality. The next thing I want to say is we kind of brushed past a slide that talked about enhancing enforcement. And I happen to be a person who came out of enforcement who feels very, very strongly that enforcement is critical to any program, environmental program, where you're regulating sources and controlling air pollution from those sources. I spoke on the hearings on the air quality plan. I wrote 2 letters of correspondence. I encourage you to continue the effort to really nourish new technologies and look at the possibility that there are things out there that would really make a big difference in our air quality. And I do also encourage you to work with SCAG, because I think there's an opportunity there to partner with them. And perhaps it goes back to the comments about really coming out with something where things are done a new way because of the lessons learned during this COVID crisis. I have a couple of other things. Very interesting that the North Harbor Gateway organization, and a person commenting on that, we're in the South Harbor Gateway in the Del Almo Action Committee, and would be interested in the work that's being done there. And then I would also like to ask about whether the South Coast Air Quality Management District is considering increasing the number of monitoring stations, because in my knowledge, the monitoring station for our community is some significant different distance from our community. So just kind of closing out what I said, please, please, please think about taking seriously the things that have happened as a result of the COVID, and beginning to have something in place where people will have a feeling that, wow, there might be some benefit coming out of all of this, because now we have more people that have some more time commuting from home, that it's more acceptable to companies to do business that way, et cetera. And the South Coast speaking out in support of that, it really does matter. It's important. And the last thing I'll talk about is trees. And I happen to believe that if we planted more trees, it would help every community in Los Angeles. And we're right now working very hard to get a park in our community. I just really think people should look more seriously at green spaces in each of our EJ communities for sure. And I worked on the Los Angeles County Sustainability Plan and participated vigorously in the preparation of that plan, and would like to see, and I would like to know whether or not you have looked at that plan, read that plan that was put together by Los Angeles County on sustainability, because they have air quality goals in that plan as well. And I also wonder how many members of community groups are represented on this work group. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Florence.
Florence, I just want to say a few words. So I wanted to address, you said a lot and I appreciate all of your comments. I just wanted to address a couple of them. So in terms of the COVID impacts, we do know that we had changes in emissions as a result of people staying home. We are still investigating what that looks like, but initially it looks like traffic counts weren't down as much as people thought. And one thing I would say is that even though we had, I think, some fairly sharp declines in light duty, so passenger vehicles, we still have a lot of the truck traffic that was happening and ongoing. And the truck traffic is really the bulk of the pollution that causes our ozone problems in the area. So we could have a situation where, everybody's staying at home and we're really reducing commuting. But if people still ordering a bunch of stuff off Amazon, which I know I was, you're still having a lot of that truck traffic running through our area and causing pollution. But it is an important point, and we're looking at it. We actually do have a regulation in place at the district on employee commute trip reduction. And so that's applicable to businesses that employ over 250 people. telework is an option for compliance with that. In light of wider spread telework and wider spread exception of that is a rule that we're evaluating how we change it to respond to the new normal and to further encourage telework. So that is something that we're looking at. And then on monitoring stations, I think I mentioned before in response to somebody else's comment, but EPA has requirements that we go through an evaluation to establish where we site monitors and to make sure we site them in areas that both capture the worst air quality and are representative of the areas that we look at. And we go through it every 5 years to make sure that that's still appropriate. So just wanted to throw that information out there.
Thank you.
I will also add that we are actually including emissions, biogenic emissions in our modeling. So emissions from trees actually are included. Trees do generate and vegetation do generate VOC emissions. So I think strategies to plant low VOC trees could be effective. But again, this is one of those strategies that we are looking at. There are strategies that cities or counties are implementing to reduce GHG emissions. So any of those strategies that have co-benefits in terms of reducing VOC and NOx, we definitely would like to know and quantify and take credit for in our planning going forward.
I just want to respond to Florence's comments or questions on the composition of the advisory group. Currently, there are about 70 members of the group, and about 1% are members. There are also about 2% that are labor union representatives. But I like to remind everybody that this is a Brown Act meeting, and the public members are always welcome to join as well.
Thank you. Let's go to Tom Poley. Tom, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Zark. It's Tim Poley, and that's all right. It's good to see you and see Sarah and everybody else, and I really appreciate you guys taking the comment. Just so other folks know, as you guys do, I represent airlines through an organization called Airlines for America, which represents the larger airlines in the country, passenger and cargo alike. So I just had a couple of things that I wanted to ask about. The first is this discussion of the relationship between NOx emissions and ozone. And I think it's a really important and interesting issue. And I know Sangmi, when she was speaking, was referring to a lot of in-house analyses that had gone forward. And I was just curious as to whether those, at some point, there's going to be some sort of publicly available analysis of this issue and of the modeling and basically the conclusions about the relationship between NOx and ozone and how it's reflected in the modeling. So that's one question. Zark, you also referred to the smaller group which would be focused on modeling issues. If you could just repeat the name of that group and tell me how to sign up, that would be helpful. The last point I would just make is that I represent a sector, aviation, that clearly has been hit very, very hard by the COVID crisis. I don't think everybody realizes that. I seem to think or pick up that some folks seem to think that things are just going to come roaring back somehow from COVID. And that's not really what we're seeing in our sector and what we expect. We really have gone down, our activity levels have gone down a great deal, and we don't expect them to recover to pre-COVID levels for years. And that obviously will affect the level of emissions that could be expected from our sector. So I'm wondering whether what the plans are to take into account the effects of COVID, where they do have, where it really has had this kind of real and what we really believe will be a lasting impact, and in terms of setting emission inventories and projections of emissions going forward. Again, thanks a lot for taking the comments. It's good to see everybody, and hope to see you guys in person at some point in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tim. We hope to see everyone in person as well. I just addressed your question on the, I think you meant the working group. Yeah, we plan to have these working groups initiated hopefully in November timeframe. So the one that would cover aircraft would be the off-road mobile source working group. Again, we like everyone's participation in that process. Again, aircraft, if you just look at the projections going forward, again, without this near-term COVID impact, is going to be a significant source of emissions in 2031. I thought I saw numbers in the range of about 20 tons of NOx per day, which is obviously pretty significant. And obviously, as you know, everyone knows it's a difficult category to achieve emission reductions from. But obviously, we are open to creative and innovative ideas to see how we can achieve reductions, and also how to incorporate the impact of COVID again going forward in terms of modeling and publicly available document. I think, I don't know, Sangmi, if you wanted to address that, but all those information will be available to the members.
Yeah, thanks. Just before you answer, Sangmi, I see you're ready to answer, but just on that, Zork, I thought you mentioned a subgroup that was focused on the modeling. So I wasn't necessarily focused on mobile sources. That's the one I was interested in. And again, you're citing pre-COVID estimates of where our emissions would be absent that. And like I said, we really see a re-rating of the industry to a lower level from which it will not recover to the pre-COVID levels for a long time. And so I just encourage you guys to realistically look at that and take it into account as we go forward.
Maybe I could ask Rong Shang also to respond to that, because I think these questions were also addressed to SCAG, which is adopting the 2020 RTP and SCS as far as the impact of COVID on growth projections. Rong Shang?
My apology again. Sorry, I just stepped out to use restroom and just came back, so I missed that comment.
The question was from Tim Poley from Airline Industries, and question was related to growth projections and the impact of COVID, because he was saying that airlines are not expected to recover for many years in terms of going back to normal operations. And so I was just responding that, you know, SCAG has, I'm not sure to what extent looked at it, but if you wanted to address that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. Yeah, actually, that's a very timely, because if some of you maybe follow SCAG, we back in May, our regional council adopted a Connexo call for federal transportation conformity purpose only, but then direct the SCAG staff to, for the next 120 days, to look among issues, one of which is the COVID-19 impact. So SCAG staff did look into that, and the conclusion, as that's what I watched earlier, the presentation, is that as you know, SCAG's RTP SES is just like a AQMP, is an ongoing process. So we do it every 4 years. Based on our the past 120 days evaluation, we feel that a lot of the issues included in our plan are still valid. But for any more long-term impact, etc., we do plan to address in our next RTP update, which is scheduled for 2024. So with regard to that specific comments about the airlines, the traffic, all those that'll be part of the process. We will start the next cycle actually pretty soon, starting from the growth forecast. That's, I think, in terms of the economic activity, that's part of that process. So yes, it will be reflected in next cycle, but not, for the one our regional council is scheduled to consider adoption actually later this afternoon.
Well, thank you for that. That's helpful. I would say it's helpful in terms of understanding the process. I would say it's not helpful in terms of having analysis that's going to properly inform the AQMP process, because as I said, it sounded like the conclusion is everything is going to get back to normal. If that's the assumption, and that's not going to be revisited for another 4 years, I think that underlying assumption just doesn't reflect the reality. And again, I just asked for AQMP or for the district to at least consider means of incorporating that. In any event, I think Sunmi has been trying to respond for a little bit. So thanks again.
Okay, so Tim, the item that I'd like to respond to is the publicly available documentation about the NOx and ozone chemistry. So one document that we published is the VOC white paper we developed during the development of 2016 AQMP. It is available on our website, and it discusses the so-called temporary increase of ozone on the course of the attainment with the NOx reduction strategy. So I can share that documentation with you. And then also this benefit is kind of widely known as a weekend effect, ozone weekend effect. And there are multiple scientific journal publications discussing that. So I can send you some the technical journals regarding that as well, if you'd like.
Thank you. So that relates to is it the titration of the ozone?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And Tim, you're welcome to attend the Scientific, Technical, and Modeling Peer Review Advisory Group. That's the name of that. And we'll make sure we add you to the name of interested parties for that working group, and you will basically receive updates to our modeling as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And one more item to add is the projection. The reflecting COVID situation in the growth projection. As Zorik and Wangshan mentioned, AQMP is based on SCAG's projection to the growth to the future years. But then the major AQMP update is going to be 2022 AQMP, which we are currently undergoing developing the inventories. So the projections included in 2020 RTP, and then to the level of the data transferred to us by the SCAG will be reflected in the next round of AQMP, which is just 2 years down the road.
By the way, if I may add, this Rongshen, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking to the COVID impact. So given the current AQMP schedule, if we would have any results early enough, certainly we will collaborate with district staff to see whether there's any way within the AQMP schedule, see whether if any update it would be necessary.
All right, thanks again.
Okay, let's go to Ryan Kenny, please. Go ahead.
Yes, hello again. This is Ryan Kenny with Clean Energy. And I just want to build on Todd Campbell's excellent comments earlier about attainment. And I'm our company's advocate in Sacramento, both on the legislative side and the regulatory side. And Just some input. It's as though the 2023 deadline is non-existent, especially at ARB. We've seen some recent regulations adopted, advanced clean trucks, omnibus, and the low NOx industry really expressed the need to include some focus on 2023 attainment deadline. And CARB especially has just basically ignored it as though it doesn't exist. So as we talk about the attainment deadlines, I would encourage your representative to CARB, as well as perhaps engaging other air districts and CAPCOA, and maybe even your new representative, to really get the 2023 deadline as a higher priority and a higher focus, because right now, like I said, it's just not being discussed. And the legislature, of course, has a lot of other big items to tackle. So it's not something that's really on the radar, especially over there at this point. I will also add that there is an economic stimulus plan being discussed. It was introduced in concept a few weeks ago, and it does have clean transportation included, but it doesn't differentiate between what kind of clean transportation, ZEBs or low NOx, and it does include infrastructure. So as that comes up again, maybe in a special session, maybe early next year, that would be something to put on your radar to advocate to make sure that both ZEBs and low NOx trucks are included. As Todd mentioned, I think incentives are not really the way to go. We need more requirements, I think, because obviously cap and trade auction revenues are so limited, and we need a lot more money than what's being allocated at this point. But I do want to put on your radar that 2031, that's being discussed, but 2023 is not, and we need to have more of a focus, I think, in Sacramento on that. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Let's go to phone line ending 990. I think it's Harvey. If it's related to this item, go ahead, please.
Hello, this is Harvey Etter speaking for myself and for PSPC, etc. First of all, on last Friday, there was a paper presented at the Advisory Committee to the Board on Environmental Justice, and said there had been, with the COVID virus, there's an 8% increase in deaths. Okay, that's got to be put into your numbers right now. So your numbers don't work, haven't worked. Anyway, want to incorporate by reference any comments we made here, any boards or committees or the staff or anything, and the other agencies since we've been litigating with you folks, which goes back many years, and the state. And that includes everything in there with the EPA and the current records and the litigation on the 91 plan, which was a federal plan, like this one you're looking at trying to wiggle around. Okay, toxics. We have now, this virus is from bats to animals. It's overcrowding, overpopulation in the industrial system, and as a vector, it's just like Zika, etc. Okay, the virus is the third. The second was from bats to camels in 10 and 12, and the Saudis got them not to give us that tag, and that's number 2, and had 34% death rate. Okay. We are putting, City of Santa Monica, the Environmental Task Force, 200 buses get their renewable natural gas from Texas, 1,000 miles away from a landfill. 70% of human antibiotics go into the feedlots for animals. So from the waste system, sewage directly, waste treatment plants, landfills, and feedlots. We're putting in now antibiotics, antivirals, and antifungals. There's been many articles written about it. We put this into the plan. It was totally ignored by you folks. 30 to 40 deaths per year by CDC paper in the exhibit we put in from 10, 15 years ago. In 18, EPA recognized that and said that there were 300 to 400,000 deaths per year. That's for the country that they're emitting. Okay, there was a Lancet study in 17 that said there was at least 1 million, 1.1 to 1.5 million in seniors from Medi-Medi in the USA. 10% of that to here is 100,000 deaths a year plus at a million per. Okay, look, You're totally ignoring it. You cannot go on with this. You can't do your trucks and reports and pitching, Pickens and what he tried to sneak in, to the ballot 10, 15 years ago. This word clean should not be used for this renewable natural gas. It's dangerous stuff, and they've got to prove that it's not in the system anywhere along that system or in distributing anywhere. And the state's got to prove through your health duties that you're not distributing, that you are doing no harm. Okay? You're doing no harm. All right. So that's your responsibility, and you're not doing it. And you're in deep doo-doo, and we're litigating. We've got 3 different classes of whistleblowers. This is included with them. And we only get a minute here, a minute there. This is garbage. Yeah, we haven't been put onto these committees and stuff for 10, 20 years. All right? You put it in before. You're going to pay you this time. And we get 18 plus, 6, 7 figures, so we can go back to the records to establish our earning that potential rate now. You pay now, or it's going to go up when we go to court. And we're in court right now, and these are negotiations.
All right. Thank you, Harvey, for your comments. Okay, I don't see any other comments from either panelists or public. Sarah, I think that's it for this item.
I think that's right.
Okay. So our next item is other business. If any member of the group would like to make any comments under that item. Seeing none. And the final agenda item is our public comment. Anybody have any other public comments? I don't see anybody raising their hands. I think that's it. Oh, I think Harvey just raised his hand. Okay. Yeah, Harvey, go ahead.
Hello. Sorry, I'm outside. I'm on the street like a senior person with the district head kid on the street. Hey, look, it's the real world. We're litigating. This stuff's got to be litigated and stopped. We're at a crucial point, a tipping point, politically and economically. What's going to happen in the future in this country has got to be taken care of and got to be talked about and part of the political process. This is exactly the opposite of what's happening. All right. I don't know. I want to see a budget. What is being spent on this so-called new plan and everything? This money has to go to us and what we're doing, and part of the settlement study and impact, along with the new deals from Markey and AOC and what's out there. The Democratic plan has got to be big changes, and this is the next 4 years we're talking about. Okay, 8 years. All right, so we can do this, and we've got to grab the bull by the horns and do it. So that money that you've got to put it in the pot with CARB doing the same thing and EPA doing the same thing, and all the stuff about what's going to be accepted in demos and all that. DOE as well, and we're also working on the tree plan out of Davos, the trillion. We put a living Christmas tree in the White House in 1970 with the first Environmental Protection Agency, Ruckel's house. All right, but okay. We got to take the bigger picture, and we got to take action in now, and there's no excuses for not doing it. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Harvey. And I think just a quick note, we hope to have our next meeting in November, December timeframe, but we will make an announcement about the start of the working group meeting. So as I said, everybody's welcome. We hope to have an open discussion on new and innovative strategies, defining strategies going forward for our next air quality management plan. So thanks everyone for your participation. Sarah?
Yeah, just want to encourage folks, if you have any feedback, specifically on the elements of Zorik's presentation, where we talked about, our path forward with developing the 2022 plan. If there's feedback in particular on the number of working groups that we have and frequency of meetings, we definitely want to hear that. So, definitely provide us that feedback.
I think that's it. Thanks everyone for your participation. As some of you mentioned, we'd like to see everyone beautiful faces. Hopefully one of these days going back to AQMD, but until then, we'll continue to have these meetings. But thank you so much for everyone's participation. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.